As we begin, let us just close our eyes, inviting awareness to descend out of the head and to awaken in the lower belly, lower hara. And join me in the discovery of this depth of peace, which is available to you. You bring your attention to your hara. Invite awareness to wake up. The lower belly is this point of absolute quietude. So giving yourself full permission to let go of any thinking in the mind. Becoming anchored deep in the belly. As you breathe here, deep and full, being mindful of the inhale, mindful of the exhale. You may notice a quiet sanity. It's deep and vast and wide. Can you give yourself to this? This quiet sanity. Letting go of anything that disturbs you. Giving yourself full permission to listen. From this space, deep and profound sanity, clarity, an expansive ground, bliss, ground. Can you allow your life to be this simple, right here, right now? No thinking, simply being this depth of silence. And so I welcome you this evening, this day, to this space of satsang. And so I invite you throughout the next hour, the next lifetime, to see what life is like if you're rooted here. We all know what life is like when we're rooted in our thinking mind. It tends to be a lot of suffering, a lot of confusion, a lot of insecurity. But when we're rooted in the hara, there tends to be a tremendous amount of silence, of depth. This is the awakening of Buddha nature. And so I welcome you. If you like, you can have your eyes closed. If you like, you can have them open. But I encourage you just to notice what it feels like when you listen from this depth of being. This silent depth of being. How your direct experience changes. For most of us, our direct experience is one of unconscious grasping, fighting, trying to fix, trying to be somewhere else than where we are. To be somewhere else than where we are. So satsang is a space of truth, which means we are here now in this present moment. And for some people, they think being in the present moment just means thinking every thought that goes through their consciousness. But being in the present moment does not mean we're lost in our human self. To live in the present moment means we are lost in our divinity, surrendered into our divinity, surrendered into the divinity of this world, this earthly plane. And its spaciousness, its peace, its emptiness, its light, its vibrancy, its love. Seeing that all things are God. All things are God. All things are divine. Okay. And so I see many of you still have your eyes closed, so we'll just play a game. We played this game in the Kundalini group, and so I'll ask you this question. Can you feel very comfortable in your own skin in this moment? And if the answer is no, then I will ask you, how can you feel very comfortable in your own skin right now? How can you feel very comfortable in your own skin right now? And so if you're uncomfortable, and yet you're willing to listen from this place of depth, this place of peace, you'll see that which is tense, that which is tight, that which is perhaps feeling unworthy or feeling angst or sadness. Can you allow those feelings to come forward and to be held? Held in this space of peace, of light, and of love. So there's this funny thing that happens. The more you surrender into your hara, the more fully Buddha nature comes online. And Buddha nature happily embraces anything that is tight and tense and confused, struggling. And so I will ask you, how can you let go of any gripping in the body? Any gripping, very common thing. For human beings just to sit and grip. Just gripping, fighting against things that aren't even here. Can you let go of any gripping? Can you let go of any sense of controlling? Can you open and trust? So this is our ongoing invitation. And so if anyone has a question, I welcome those. I just ask that they are short, clear, and direct. Someone emailed a question. This is from Grace. Grace writes, a deep spiritual awakening is continuing to unfold, including intense kundalini energy moving through the throat and the third eye chakras. My question is, what is your feedback on balancing the intense longing to meditate, to be of service, while still functioning in the world? The phrase being in the world but not of it has never felt more true. Though I have a lovely life with family and clients, my heart craves God. There is no longer any desire to do what I used to do. This only continues to deepen. With great love and respect, Grace. And so, Grace, when God comes for us, begins to awaken in us, the question is, can we fall into alignment with this? Can we fall into alignment with this movement? Last week, I think Chrissy asked me this question. She said something like, Craig, you said you mimicked your teacher. What does that mean? It means I attuned to him. And when God came to me in the form of spiritual awakening, I attuned to God. So what does attune mean? It means to match the presence of what's here. So if silence is waking up in you, and freedom is waking up in you, you can help to attune to this by spending lots of time in silence, lots of time in meditation. In fact, like when spiritual awakening comes, when it's a true thing, not just a moment of insight, but a true awakening, it tends to come and take your life. Does it come and take your life from you? You know, what you thought was your life. It's always God's life. It's just an illusion that we think it's ours. And so, yeah, I recommend listening to this impulse. Like if you're wanting to meditate more, if you're wanting to be in silence more, like if this is what's coming online, we listen to this. And when I started, actually waking up, I just went on every retreat I could. I took as much time off work as I could. Right? God took away the ability for me to work for a good period of time. And I just surrendered to the process, gave my life to the process. And the people who wake up and stay awake, that's normally what happens, is they give their life to the process. The people who wake up but don't stay awake, they normally don't give their life to the process. They say, oh, I like this when it feels good, but when it's inconvenient, or when it's not, when it's not convenient to trust, they don't trust. When it's not convenient to surrender, they don't surrender. And so then the old habit just takes over. I mean, eventually God will circle back around to us. But, we can prolong the process. It's part of our free wills. We can prolong it. And so I encourage you to jump into the process, to melt into it, to merge with it. Yeah, and Patrick writes in the comments, losing my life to God scares me. Yeah, it does. It's scary. It scared me. But, I just asked myself a question. Who do I trust more? Do I trust like Craig's crazy mind? Or do I trust the mind of God? Like whose mind? Like who do I trust more here? Like my mind that has led me in this world and made a series of poor choices on planet Earth? Or do I trust God's mind? And so, yeah, it scared me to let go of my mind, which served me not so well. But a lot of people don't want to let go of their mind, even if their mind doesn't serve them well. I saw this person at the beach yesterday. It was hilarious. They were a very disheveled looking person. And they wore a t-shirt and said, I make poor choices. It's like, I could have wore that t-shirt as well for most of my life. Like, I make poor choices. And I knew that about myself. Like, I was honest. And I knew that my human mind made poor choices. And so I knew, okay, I have a choice here. I can continue down that road of listening to my mind and living from an egoic reality. Or I could trust in this greater mind, the mind of God. I said, okay, well, I'm going to go with God. I'm just going to gamble on God. And it certainly worked out for the better. It certainly worked out for the better. But, Patrick brings up this great point is we have to face our fear. the fear of letting go of the known, even if the known doesn't work so good. And to step into the unknown. To step into the unknown. Now, once upon a time, I went to visit a friend, in a faraway land, and my friend was quite wealthy. And he had a very expensive and beautiful sports car. Like this incredible, some kind of hybrid, gas electric sports car. I did not get to drive it. I wish I got to drive it, but I went out for a ride with like his wife. We went out. I can't remember what we did. We were just going to go out and run some errands, and the thing just about ran out of gas. In this country, they call it petrol. Almost ran out of petrol. So we pulled up to the gas station, and the two of us could not figure out where the gas tank was in this car. It took us 35 minutes to figure out where the gas tank was. Finally, some fella who was like a sports car, luxury car, I don't even know what you call this thing. It was like a $300,000 car. He came and showed us where the gas tank was in this car. It's a very hidden place. I'm pretty good mechanically, but I walked around like a fool. But was I happy that I went for the ride, even though I had to look like a fool, and it scared me when we almost ran out of gas and couldn't figure out how to fill the thing up? Yeah, I'm happy. I'm happy. I'm happy I went. And see, on this spiritual path, we have to be courageous. We have to be like an explorer. So yesterday, I took my family to this beach in South Carolina, and it's called the Bone Yard Beach. I saw pictures of it on Instagram. It's so utterly beautiful on Instagram. Just incredibly beautiful. The sky was lit up in these oranges and purples and reds and pinks. And it's this beach with these giant oak trees that the ocean has taken their life. And so there's these bones of these giant trees on the beach, and you can kind of sit on the trees, and oak trees like growing sideways and all these different angles, and you can sit under them and have a picnic. And so my wife said, let's go out there. I said, okay, yeah, let's do it. And we packed up the van and loaded up a picnic and everything. Drove out to this beach. And when we got to the parking lot, it wasn't like in California where you just pull up to the beach and you just get out and there's the beach. We had to walk through the jungle. I said, okay, let's go. And we were wearing not much clothes because we're at the beach and it's really hot. We had to walk through the jungle, and we proceeded to be attacked by all these mosquitoes. It's like a swarm of mosquitoes. The hike just kept going on and on. I was like, God, where is this beach? And we finally got out to the ocean, and it was a dreadful day. And the beach it looked like a scene from like a horror film. It was one of the most creepy places I've ever been. I've been all over the world. Oh my God, this does not look like like it looked on Instagram. And the tide was way up, so there was very little beach. And there were all these little like cactuses. I kept stepping on them. So I was like screaming. And I got them out of my feet, and then I sat down, and then my daughter came to me screaming. She had some on her bathing suit, like on her belly, and I was picking them off. And my daughter had a shovel in her hand, like full of sand. And so I was picking them off, like I was down at her level, like kind of squatted down, picking them off. And my daughter took her shovel and she just moved her hand real quick, just threw sand all in my face. I was just like, oh my God. I'm like, all right, guys, we're calling it. Like, we're out of here. Like the wind was blowing, it was howling. It was just, it could have been like this beach. It could have been like been called like the beach of the lost souls in like the movie, the Pirates of the Caribbean or something. Waiting for the Kraken to come up out of the ocean. It was just terrible. And see, on the spiritual path, you have to be willing to let go of the known and step into the unknown. But see, what our ego is doing is our ego is telling us, stay home, stay safe. Stay home, stay safe. Don't go out, don't venture out. You may find yourself in trouble in a foreign land. You may find yourself in a place with noxious, pointy, prickly, spiky plants, like these cactus. I've never seen a plant like with these. It's like some kind of beach cactus. And so it was like these little balls, and it had like 25 spikes in it. And when I was pulling it out of my skin, it was like a cactus with a hook, like it had hooked my skin. I was like, my Lord, what is going on here? And see, our ego tries to keep us safe so that we don't have to have an uncomfortable experience. It tries to keep us safe. But if we want to be awake, we cannot be concerned so much with safety, like with mental, emotional, psychological safety. By all means, be concerned about physical safety, but your mental, emotional, psychological safety, you have to be willing to venture out if you want to discover new worlds. New worlds. And sometimes when you venture out, like you might find yourself in some confused places. But that doesn't mean we shut down. That doesn't mean we listen to fear and stay home the rest of our life. That just means that this isn't the place for you in this moment. It's not the right place in this moment. Or maybe it is the right place. Maybe we need to have that experience for some reason. And we certainly had a good laugh about it. We certainly had a good laugh about it. What I remind people is that God, the energies of spiritual awakening, will never take something from you that is good and necessary. So let me clarify that. Like God only wants to take from you, like the energies of spiritual awakening only want to take from you that which does not work. That which does not work. And so it's important to realize this. So sometimes God will take a relationship from us. And we'll say, no, no, I love her so much. I love them so much. Don't take this from me. Sometimes God will take that from you because that relationship is toxic, or simply because it's just not the right relationship. That person is meant to live a different life. You are meant to live a different life without them. Sometimes God will take our memory. Well, that happened to me once upon a time. God takes our memory from us, and we may find that frightening. But in the place of memory, like where we have that hard drive that is just so utterly full, God makes it empty. Says, no, I want to give you emptiness instead of a mind that is full of painful memories of the past. I want to give you emptiness, and spaciousness, and freedom in its place. And so, as I circle back to this question from Grace, she wants to meditate more, and she wants to be of service while still functioning in the world. She has a question mark around that. The phrase being in the world but not of it has never felt more true. And this is where, Grace, I fully encourage you to give your life to your true desire. But I also encourage you to not fall into another trap. Because sometimes the spiritual ego makes a massive mistake in the beginning stages of spiritual awakening. The spiritual ego wakes up and says, I am awake. No one else is awake. I know the way. And look at all these fools here on planet Earth, walking around asleep, living in samsara. And me, I am awake, and I live in the truth, and they live in the worldly world. We start to get a little too big for our britches. Now, almost everyone, myself included, makes this mistake. In fact, we have to make this mistake. What it does is, when we wake up in this way, we create this dividing line between that which is awake and that which is asleep. It helps us developmentally get established, become established in this space of being awake. I am awake. I see my thoughts and my emotions. I see they are not true. I see how everyone else is living. I see that they are not living in the truth. I am choosing to live in alignment with the truth. And so it's important in the beginning, the same way a teenager must individuate themselves from their family system in order to grow into adulthood. So the same thing is happening here on this path. We need to individuate ourselves into the realm of spiritual awakening. And by that, I mean we need to separate ourselves from our own egoic identification. We're waking up out of our ego into the land of the awakened ones. I am awake. I am awake. And it's important to be established there for some time. But at some point, we must realize that this teaching around being in the world but not of it, at some point you realize it is never felt more false. This division that we create through a teaching like this, that there's a spiritual world and a worldly world. There is only one world. And this world is God's world. And so it's important that we don't separate the world into the world of meditation and the world of service. Like, is this being some holy world? And then, like, when your car breaks down, you go visit your mechanic and you're like, this guy, he's asleep. He's a crook. He's doesn't know what spirituality is, and I do. You know, we have all these ideas. Like when you're truly awake, you see that the mechanic is God. You see that a terrible day at the beach is God. You know, we saw God in the form of the destroyer yesterday. Just the ocean destroying, you know, a beautiful beach, beautiful trees. You see God in the form of your dog, God in the form of an alligator, God in the form of a mosquito, God in the form of traffic, God in the form of suffering. When we see God everywhere, when we're in the world fully, we see that this is God's world. I like to change this to not being in the world but not of it, to being in the world and not being confused by it, not being confused by the world. And again, most people think like that the world is tempting them, trying to make them fall back to sleep. Let us all take some responsibility here and see that it is us. It is our own mind that we are tempted by. We don't need to worry about the mind of the world confusing us, the collective confusing us. It's normally our egoic identity that we are confused by. So it's not your family that's the problem. It's how we relate to our family. That is the problem. It's how we relate to them. Us wanting them to be different. Us thinking that we are better than them. Us thinking that they are confused and we are not. Us thinking that we are the holy ones and the rest of the world is a bunch of fools. We want to make sure that we don't fall into this type of thinking, because then our spirituality is creating violence in the world. If like I am awake and they are all asleep, I am holy and they are not. Like this is create a hell realm. A hell realm. So the question is can you give yourself over to the will of God? And if you notice what the will of God does, the will of God loves this world, showers this world with grace, blesses this world. God isn't up in heaven judging and condemning and cursing this world like most spiritual people do. So, you know, she writes something here, you know, this kundalini energy moving through her throat and her third eye chakras. And when it moves to the third eye, oftentimes we open into a realm of transcendence. What kundalini it really is about God giving birth into form. Into form. So we see that life is God fully and completely through all seven minds. And so I encourage you to give yourself fully to this, but make sure you're not thinking of yourself as better, or that the world is dirty or the world is wrong. You want to make sure that you get deeply established in the truth so that you're not confused by your own mind, by your own egoic nature, and then, of course, by the mind and the egoic nature of others. So, Grace, I hope there was something really helpful Okay. And the last thing she writes is there's no desire to do what I used to do. And so on the path, like when your heart starts waking up, you'll find that your heart leads you. And so your desires may shift, they may change. And so it's your job to listen deeply to your true desires. As we wake up, we should expect great change to happen. This goes back to what Patrick was saying. Losing my life to God scares me. Yeah, but we have to remember here, God only wants to give you life, evolution only wants to give you a greater life. A greater life. Now, sometimes you have to go into the pressure cooker first and have the old life cooked out of you before a new life can be downloaded into you. And sometimes this can be quite unpleasant, to say the least. And again, like sometimes the ego's right that, yeah, like it's probably going to hurt and it's going to be difficult. Like transformation tends to be a messy process. Like the Christian symbol for transformation is a fella hanging on a cross. So it can be quite frightening in a human way. But it doesn't mean it's wrong. It doesn't mean it's bad. It doesn't mean it's worse. And it doesn't even mean we should be frightened of it, even if it feels bad. So yesterday, after we failed miserably at the beach, I brought my daughter home and we jumped in the swimming pool. And it was a little chilly. It's starting to cool down here. But again, you jump in the chilly swimming pool and it lights you up and you feel alive. You feel the crisp and the freshness and the aliveness, the fluidity of water, the brilliance of life. You jump in a pool that isn't the perfect temperature. And you smile. You say, I am here. I'm fully online. So anyways, okay. Kyle writes a good question. I'll just follow that up with, Craig, do you recommend that spiritual teachers study psychotherapy, trauma, etc.? Of course. Of course. To study psychology is simply to study the mind, the veils of the mind, the places where you get confused. So, if one looks at Buddhism, like Buddhism is the oldest psychology. Like that's a lot of Buddhism is just purely psychology. It's a very high form of psychology. A lot of yoga is psychology too, by the way. Now you're studying the veils. You're studying the places where you get hooked, places you get confused. What Western psychotherapy adds to the mix is the shadow, because that's something that wasn't known so much of in the East, unless you study in the tantric traditions. But like the tantric path, like what is tantra? Tantra is transformational psychology. And like what is psychology? We could look at it as a study of the mind, but psychology is the study of growth. What is growth? Evolution. What is evolution? Evolution is God's will. And to live as spiritually awakened beings, your psychological nature has to be clear, empty, and free. And so it's very hard to be awake if you don't understand your psychology and if you're not free of your hiccups, your confusions, your wounds, your shadows. In fact, to study trauma, like what studying trauma is all about is studying a path of love, unconditional love. That's what the study of trauma is. Now, some people, they study trauma so much and they believe in it so much and they become like frightened and fearful. Like you can get swallowed up in psychology, just like you can get swallowed up in anything. You get swallowed up in spiritual dogma. And the more you study, the further you get from God. Whereas the more you open your heart, the closer you become to God. And so some people, like the shadow side of psychology is when you study psychology purely from the mind without the heart, you tend to fall into like the same thing with Buddhism. Like if you study Buddhism from the mind and not the heart, you fall into nihilism and despair. And like, you're like, what's the point? It's meaningless. If you study psychology from a perspective of the heart, opening to love, opening to strength, opening to power, you're simply opening to your divine essence, like the different manifestations of your own divinity, of true nature. And so when someone doesn't understand psychology, well, if we don't understand psychology, we become a dangerous person because we can have massive wounds and shadows. So I hope that was helpful, Kyle. I could speak at great length about that, but I'm gonna leave it at that. Okay. All right, Aaron, are you here? You're back? Yeah. Okay.
Hey. Wow, I was able to unmute myself. That's
Yeah.
weird. That's new.
Maybe I guess I didn't press the buttons right when I started. So,
Right.
anyways,
No worries. Hey, hi, Craig.
yeah, good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you. And hello, community. Today, Craig, my question is about um, just falling into core patterns that are very painful. And it's not just, so I should say, let me front it. It's a choice. It's also something that's been with me since I was very young. So there's some, how do I say, perhaps like younger developmental stages that feel very compelled as opposed to being in that place of choice. So I wouldn't say I'm completely integrated there, but it's not so much talking about the pattern itself. It's that, man, I've hit this thing over and over and over again. I'm 30 and I can say I've been hitting it for 2 decades. That's a long time for someone my age. And I would say that I'm just a little discouraged. I know I'm going to get through it. I know I'm going to heal through it. This isn't going to be the rest of my life. But I'm really looking for, like, I'm caught in it. I'm feeling discouraged. And what your teacher or teachers said to you in these times in your life, and like, I think I'm looking for some encouragement, you know?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Beautiful. You know, sometimes God gives us things that that don't heal. And like I've found these things in my life where I'm like, huh, like this is interesting. Like it doesn't appear that there's much movement here. And when we come up to a wall like this, like something that appears immovable, the normal response would be despair, frustration, anger, even hopelessness. But if we're humble, we can ask a question like, well, what is God doing with me here? By giving me something that doesn't seem to change, doesn't seem to move. Well, one, it brings us into like a great degree of humility, a great degree of acceptance. It gives us the possibility to actually learn about unconditional love, and like the type of love that never looks at a clock or never looks at a time. And that's another thing it does is it breaks down our relationship with time. Because most of us have like a ticker in our head. This thing should be healed by now. It should be done. I'm over it. I did my work. This is a cause and effect world, right? Like if I do this, it should equal that. And some of the hardest lessons is that God's the healer, that things heal in God's time. Just getting into God's time. Boy, that's a whole different like realm of spiritual awakening when we come into God's time. And there's just no resistance or no wanting anything to be different than how it is. Just like, okay, like this is my life. This is my life. Like this is happening. Like this type of thing, it has the potential, again, like I can't stress this enough, to train us and to teach us and to attune us to unconditional love. And for our love to be unconditional, our will has to be beat down, has to be turned to dust. And the only way for our will to turn to dust is to give us something that can't heal, doesn't move. Or maybe it is healing, but just like at a snail's pace. It's just like, excuse my language, but just like, fuck. Like this thing, it's just not. And like, this is a very unpopular teaching. No one really wants this. People say they want this. But again, like this is just one of those brutal teachings. But for us to truly come into alignment with God's time is both eternal and it's also, I'm going to use this uneloquent term, it's like dinosaur time. It's like things just take forever. Forever, like literally. Like dinosaur time. Like when you go out, like you live in Colorado, but you go out like in the mountains of Colorado, like geological time. Like that's the thing, that's the word, more eloquent. Where you see like, wow. Look how long it took for God to evolve from a single cell organism to this thing. And this thing still has the same fight or flight response as a single cell organism. Like, my God, what kind of timetable are we on here? Oh, we're on God's timetable. That's the timetable we're on. And when we open into this, when we truly experience freedom in this, like if I circle back to that question of we're in the world but not of it, we don't look at anything in us or in this world as bad or wrong or shouldn't be here. There's actually like a perfect understanding, like, of course this thing is still here. And even like from a great place of compassion, of course it's still here. Like this is a massive wound. This is immense heartache. Of course. It's taken 2+ decades. Of course. Whereas our mind is always thinking like, if I didn't have this thing here, then maybe I'd be more free. There'd be more space here, more emptiness. I would trip over this thing. And then I would be like Jesus. I would be like Jesus. Because Jesus was perfect, right? He had nothing in him that he ever had. It's like, I see like all these types of like spiritual thoughts, or wanting life to be different thoughts, or wanting God's world to be different than how it is thoughts, wanting ourselves to be different than how we are. I mean, basically, we're wanting to live in a world where there's no evolution, or where we're at the top of the evolution and we're just done with it. We want to get to that thing the Buddha talked about, the end of suffering. And I'm just gonna just say this, like, there is no end of suffering here on planet Earth. And we can have a lot less psychological suffering. That's what spiritual awakening is really about. A lot less, a tremendous amount less. That doesn't sound as pithy and as beautiful and as sexy as it's the end of suffering. But there is, and I'm going to contradict my own self, there is an end of suffering that occurs when we stop arguing with the fact of evolution, that the fact of evolution will continue in us. Will continue in us. The fact that evolution will continue in us. Like when we stop arguing with that. Like when I find old habits in me, or confused places, or I make a mistake, there's not a single thought that I shouldn't be as I am in this moment. There's just no judgment of it. Like I see this machine for what it is. It's like, yeah, like of course, of course, this thing is still here. I'm not like, damn it, I should be healed of this. And the reason I say of course is because there's freedom in it. There's freedom in my humanity. Like in an evolutionary context. Of course, my Father is still within me. Of course. And so, again, it's not a pleasant teaching, not a teaching anyone likes, but there's just certain things in life that I don't want to say don't heal, but things that move very slowly. But when you step back and you begin to experience yourself in a timeless way and in an eternal way, even like beyond lifetimes type of way. See how it's like, oh yeah, like plenty of time, plenty of time for this thing to heal and to work itself. There's plenty of time. And there's plenty of love. And there's plenty of resistance. And it's all okay. It's all okay. And it's like I'm not going to look at my 8-year-old and say, hey, like I moved her to this new land. I don't say, hurry up and be happy. Like I've already had a talk with you about this new place and meeting new friends. And so you should just be happy now. Like what she tells me every day. She's so sad. She misses her friends. It breaks my heart. I'm like, of course you do. Me too. Me too. Let's go back home. Let's go back to Colorado. Let's go back, sweetie. Let's go back. Let's go back to where we belong. We're safe in the mountains. Let's go back. And so, I could have just told you, like, it will get better, and like cheer you on, like, it will get better. And it will, like you said, like, it will. Like, I know it will. Like, evolution is happening, but sometimes it goes really slow. And again, like, I like to look and say, why does it go slow? And sometimes it goes slow because like there's just a part of this that we're missing. I find this all the time. Like, there's a part of me that I miss, that I don't listen to, that I haven't fully heard, that I haven't fully experienced. I did a silly thing the other day. I was at jujitsu, and I was just moving too fast in my body. And I ran around a fella, he was better than me, but I ran around him, got to his back, and I was getting ready to take his back, put me in a dominant position. And when I ran around him, I like twisted and tore something in my knee. And I was like, oh shit, like that's not good. What I just did. And like I push it with my body. Because I spend a lot of time in bed because of long COVID. And then when I go to jujitsu, I just want to run. I want to play in this body. And I went too fast. So I sat on the sideline for a little bit, and I was like, I could probably walk this off. I'm tough. Like, I have a really strong will. And then I went out and I rolled with someone else. I threw my back out, and I was like, oh man. Threw out my knee and my back. And we're not even getting to the icing on the cake. I was like, okay, God, I hear you. I need to slow down. I need to put this down. I'm going to walk away. And so, I've never left class early. Like, it's unheard of for me. So I was like, okay, I'm just going to call it a day. Friday, I'm going to go home. Got out, got in my car. And people here, I'm just not used to it. They drive so fast. It's just like the whole world. It breaks my heart just how fast everyone moves. And I made a mistake as like I attune to them sometimes. Like they're driving fast. Okay, so I'm going to drive fast. And it was a strange place I live. People drive really fast, but there's also a tremendous amount of elderly here, elderly drivers. And so I was driving, and like the person behind me, they push you along here. And where I lived in Colorado, people didn't do this. They didn't like mad dog you from behind. Like, people do that. It's just there's just too many people on planet Earth, and so everyone's just trying to get to where they're going. And so the person behind me is kind of like just pushing me along, and I was like, no, I'm just like, I'm calling it a day. I'm driving slow. I'm doing my thing. And this lady in front of me, she pulled out, and I was going to go behind her. And she slammed on her brakes, and I hit her. I hit her like going like 3 miles an hour, maybe. I was like, oh, I need to slow down even more fully. Even more fully. Even more fully. Even more fully. She jumped out of her car, started screaming at me. I was just like, hey, I am so sorry. So sorry. Truly sorry. So sorry. So sorry. I'm sorry to her. I'm sorry that I wasn't listening to myself in a deeper and fuller way, that I wasn't listening to my life, that I wasn't listening to God, I wasn't listening to, it's funny, this, like I have this autoimmune condition, and it makes, I'm like the most relaxed guy, but it makes my nervous system really tense. And I just need to slow everything down, and I'm already going so slow. But it's not slow enough. And see, sometimes these things that are deep, like what you're describing, they're wanting us to go even deeper and even lower and even slower and even more fully embracing them. Like even more fully than we, like sometimes we get on the path, we're like, oh, I'm doing a pretty good job of embracing this. I know what I'm doing. I know how to love what's here. I know how to love. And the beautiful thing about this life, the beautiful thing about persistent pain, the beautiful thing about like long-term illnesses, like what I have, is they are such immense teachers. Like they are the greatest teachers. Is when you are given something, you know, like no one wants this, but when you're given something that does not heal, it teaches you a depth of mastery that you have no idea that it exists. But our mind is always like, if it's healed, then I'll get to that. And God's like, no, 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 no. Through giving you something that doesn't work, that is going to create the causes and conditions for a depth of mastery. I'm going to give you 12 disciples, and they're all going to abandon you and betray you. It's like what? What? Why? Why are they all going to abandon me? Like, why? And when they all abandon you, and you're on the cross, and you're hanging there, and you're bleeding out, and you're like, oh yeah, this is a deeper level of surrender than if I was here with my 12 boys and they all had my back. You know, like, I got my 12 boys and they all got my back. They're all backing me up. It's, you know, the 13 of us, I guess, is how that'd be. The 13 of us against Pontius Pilate and the crowd. Like, we got this. I got my boys. I got my gang. I got my tribe. But I was like, no, 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 no. I'm going to take it all away from you. All away from you. Because that last bit of ego, I am going to crush and turn to dust. So you can discover unconditional love. Truly unconditional love. Again, like this isn't a teaching this is not a teaching we'd wish on our worst enemy. We wouldn't wish this on anyone. Like the brutality in it. But it's through this brutality, it's through this betrayal, it's through this immovability that it awakens our heart to the Christ. To the Christ. Literally, to the Christ. Knowing oneself as the Christ. It's like we have this idea in spirituality that we get to a place where disaster doesn't happen. Like we've risen above everything. We got all the boxes checked. We made it to that land where we just float away on the bliss cloud. The dakinis are just serving us grapes, you know. We're in a giant cloud of bliss, a bubble bath of bliss, just like some realm where there's nothing uncomfortable. And that world will come when we leave planet Earth. It will come. You have your day in heaven. But this is a world of mud. It's a world of mosquitoes. It's a world of violence. It's a world of confusion. It's a world of evolution. And that's what we're doing here. Our job is to continue to open and evolve. And evolve. And evolve beyond what we even know is possible. And beyond what we can imagine is possible. Beyond what we can imagine is possible. So anyways, a beautiful question. Yeah, thank you. A heart of compassion. That's what this path is about. Heart of compassion. Okay. Let's hear from Terry. Terry, are you here?
Hi. But I just wanted to mention, I think Johan had his hand up. Does he have a question? Maybe he can go before me. I can ask mine next week because it's a recurring question.
I don't see Johan here, but
Oh,
yeah, I can respond to yours. Johan, if you do, you can raise your hand again, but I'm going to talk with you right now.
okay. Okay. Every time I meditate, especially if I'm listening to you, and you say certain things, and it's beautiful, and it brings up a lot of gratefulness. That's how it feels, like gratefulness, but it always comes out like tears. And I'm always thinking, why is it tears? And I keep thinking, there's some kind of like self-pity or sorrow like left over. And like, I'm like so happy that I don't have that anymore. I don't know. It's like, it's really confusing because it's like, it just comes out as tears. It's like, there's like this leftover pain or something. And then I'm just like so happy that like it's so beautiful. And I don't know. I just don't know how to put it in words. And I'm not sure if that's what it is. I'm just trying to understand why it's always like crying. Because it feels like happiness, but confused. It's confusing to me.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it is confusing. Like as we're waking up, you're going to find yourself releasing all kinds of things. And so when we release, like one of the ways mammals release, one of the great ways, especially the human mammal, is we release, we surrender through tears. We surrender through shaking. And you know, if tears are flowing, that means you're letting go. You're letting go. Now, almost everyone has an aversion to tears, and our culture isn't really trained in how to grieve. And so, you know, if we took a training course in grieving, it'd be basically like this thing I say, breathe, feel, open, experience, like just let it flow, but don't think about it. Like if we think that tears are bad, that sadness is bad, if we judge sadness is wrong, if we judge sadness or if we associate tears with sadness and sadness is bad and it shouldn't be here, then, you know, we're going to get in this whole psychological dance. Whereas if you just let yourself cry, if there's tears here, then afterwards you feel lighter. And part of spiritual awakening is like you're going to let go of a tremendous amount of veils, tremendous amount of like holding And like when you realize you've been holding your whole life and you start to open and it starts, and the holding actually begins to shake out of you and release through tears, it feels joyous and it feels spacious and it feels happy, and you're crying and you're like, why am I crying? But when you know that tears are just a form of releasing, you know, sometimes I smile, I laugh, I cry, like all at once.
Yeah.
Like nowhere in here am I saying it's bad, it's wrong, it shouldn't be here. And nowhere in here am I going into self-pity. So in order to go into self-pity, you have to be picking up thoughts and believing thoughts, you know, that like that this shouldn't have happened, or poor me, or this, that. You know, the way I normally deal with that, if there's a part of me that feels like it's hurting, I breathe into it and I embrace it, and it normally cries more. But when I don't identify with the thoughts, then the thing can empty out of me. But if I identify with self-pity, it's almost like you're releasing, and then you have a foot on the brakes. And so it's like you're letting go, but then you're picking it back up again. And the idea here is just to let go. And if there's pity, we embrace the one who feels, I don't like this word, but embrace the one who feels pitiful. Embrace the one who feels like she's suffering. As we breathe more deeply and fully into her, acknowledging her pain, validating it, but not getting lost in it. And so that can circle back to that teaching on being in the world, but not of it, is like we feel what's here, we experience what's here, but we don't become enmeshed in the feeling of pity, because that will keep it stuck within us. Whereas if we acknowledge, gosh, this was so hard, and we allow ourselves to cry, you know, then it empties out of us. And it leaves our body, it leaves our form. And so ultimately, like I see tears as a great thing. It shows your heart is open, energy is moving. And like these psychological veils that I was speaking to Kyle about, like they are releasing. And so through the path of grieving, we feel emptier and more spacious. But when we don't grieve what's within us, we tend to become more neurotic, because we're holding that thing within us still. And then it shows up in a wound, a shadow, a repressed energy, a tightness, a tension. And there's this beautiful dance of when we grieve and we breathe into our grief, we breathe into our sadness, we meet it with love and kindness. If there's any sense of I'm unworthy, that will begin to be healed, because you make yourself worthy through honoring and loving what's here and allowing it to empty out of you. So it's very healing. And so I'm going to encourage more of this, and just, you know, just so you get like a sense of like what my path was like. Like, let's say, I'm just going to throw out a number here, like say like the non-dual aspect of spiritual awakening. Let's say it took like, I don't know, between 5 and 8 years to kind of work itself out. During those 5 to 8 years, I cried immensely, like almost every day. It's just like tears, and it'd be spontaneous tears, just random tears, just out of nowhere. There'd just be tears just flowing. And whether I saw something radically beautiful, something horrific, if I saw someone hitting their kid, if I saw old memories, if I met an old friend, if I saw just any kind of trauma that came, it was just like I was just immediately just crying and just crying and crying. I mean, and just a moment ago when I was speaking with Aaron just about this openness, like tears started coming out of my eyes. And so when one is open, like tears flow. But to me, like tears and bliss. It just feels the same. Like there's an aliveness, a freshness, an exuberance in it, movement of energy, a spaciousness, a peace. Like, like when you really feel into pity, like when you really open to it, there's this type of vulnerability that is so sweet, so tender, so compassionate. Like if you don't go into the ego realm of it, when you go into the divine realm, it's wondrous. And there's this immense validation of your humanity, what this human self has been through. And my God, is there such love there? It's such a tender love. It's like the love, like in the Christian tradition, you'll see like an image of Mary holding little baby Jesus, and just this immense, holy, tender love of the embrace of the child. So this has the ability to bring this online. But sometimes we just have cultural beliefs. Like in our culture, we have a belief that we shouldn't cry. If we cry, there's something wrong. Whereas I have just a recognition, if I'm crying, that means energy's moving, things are emptying out of me, and that will make me lighter. And so anytime tears are flowing, their tears can only flow if there's a space of compassion to begin with. There's a space of openness. So again, I see it as a good thing. A good thing. A good thing. And in the Dalai Lama, I've said this often, he says, I laugh and cry in equal amounts each day. Each day. And so when your heart is open, you feel more. And when you're someone like him in his position where he has all these refugees and people struggling, people coming in with immense, trauma and heartache, of course he's going to cry. Sometimes he's crying for them. Sometimes I'm crying for others. I don't even know who I'm crying for. It just moves.
Yeah.
So part of being awake is just being this radically open heart that is simply feeling. And whether you're feeling your pain, your partners, your neighbors, your child's, your dogs, pain of the planet, pain of your neighborhood, the pain of the city, you just feel it and it moves through you. And through the law of oneness, just sometimes karma is worked out through you because it can't be worked out through another because they're not there yet. And so I'm going to leave you with that, Terry. Just open, open, open. Feel it all, trust it all, be okay with it all.
Okay.
Yeah, beautiful, beautiful. Yeah, and it'll things really change too when the hara comes online. There's this deeper level of okayness. But the hara more fully comes online, and I could say this to Aaron too. The hara comes more fully online, like through the total willingness to embrace these things that tend to be really persistent. Okay. All right. Taylor writes, I was also feeling about things taking a long time that we learn a level of sacredness around that thing. And that becomes a gift to know that level of sacredness of reality that is so strong and honoring of suffering. Yeah, Taylor, that was really beautiful. Really beautiful. Taylor, this is why I'm encouraging you to write, my friend. Like this is just so beautiful the way you acknowledge this. Yeah. Yeah, this radical sacredness comes online. So thank you, Taylor. Okay. Thank you all for sharing your your hearts with me and sharing your hearts with this world. And I'll just say this, that sometimes on this path, we think it's us, we're trying to wake up. But each of you, each of us is the earth, is the planet, is humanity. Each of us has all of humanity within us. And so your willingness to show up here, it's not just this individual endeavor for yourself. You're doing something for the planet, for the species, for all human beings. You're doing something quite great. Quite great. And so I just want to acknowledge the immense work that you're doing through simply showing up to a meeting like this. So I honor each of you, those of you here, those of you who aren't here. I honor you. And so much love to each of you. And we'll see you all soon. Good night, everyone.